The conversation you are about to hear was recorded in 2020 during the height of the global pandemic. And now, Global Comedy Studios presents, Is This a Bad Time to Talk?
All right, it is May 21st, 2020, around 2:30 New York time. I'm about to call TJ Jagadowski, considered by many to be one of the greatest improvisers ever, but also a great guy, a really good human being. He's done so much, Improv Olympics, Second City. You probably know him from the Sonic commercials he does with Peter Gross. Hello?
Hello, Ali.
Is this TJ Jagadowski?
This is he.
Is this a bad time to talk?
It's as good as any, pal. It's a bad time to do everything. I'm not sure. Yeah, this will work.
AKA, I'm here to listen. You may find throughout our conversation where you might say, "Are you still there?" And I'm just going to go, "I'm here to listen. I'm here to listen."
Well, this will be fun then, because I'm not great on talking, so this could have some real gaps in it, pal.
Hey, I'm okay with the silence.
You know, fair enough.
I often find myself saying, "Hello, darkness, my old friend." But just to inform you, this phone call is being recorded. In New York City, you have to tell someone it's being recorded. Are you cool with that?
Click.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Bingo. And it might be posted because I still have to figure that out as an old dude. Right now, it's just a phone call between old friends. And
well, fair enough. It's been a long time coming then.
And to paint a picture for you, I'm using an old handheld receiver that I plug into my iPhone to give me that feeling of calling a friend after dinner and being so excited.
You can really wedge it in the shoulder there, in the shoulder crook. You know, when you can really grip a receiver in there.
Jeez, I'm doing it right now as you said it. Jeez, immediately. It's like you are like AI when it comes to improv. Yeah. Like I mentioned the receiver, and boom, there is a beautiful specific to paint the picture. Oh, man, even object work.
The original hands-free, right? I mean,
that's right.
That's
right. Oh, man. Well, thank you for taking my call, because not everybody does, Teach. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, I'm happy to still be on the list now.
But, I'm the one who's on other people's list, not the other way around. But this thing was kind of born out of the pandemic where, after a while, in the early days of the virus, I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I had this idea of like, I've got people in my phone that if the 14-year-old Ali, or the 12-year-old saw my phone and the list of people in my phone, he'd go, why aren't you calling these people and talking to them and recording it,
And also, who are these people? They're nobody right now.
Right. Right now, they're nobody. That's right. That's right. Unless he was a time-traveling 12-year-old Ali.
Right. There he is.
So I started like calling people up. Started with Kevin McDonald from Kids in the Hall, and I just started calling folks up, and I've gotten a chance to talk to Dratch and Michael Shannon and Pasquazi and Janine Garofalo, and I saw your name, and I said, let's see if TJ is willing to chat with me for a little bit about his journey, the bifurcation.
So you got down. Are we at the third tier of friends now, or because this is those names rate some merit there, brother.
Well, I would say this. You were on the first tier of friends, but it was like, do I bother TJ? So there was more fear to get up and go and the gumption to be able to have the courage to say, will you talk to me?
Look at you finding this deep well of resolve. How about you? Good work, pal.
I mean, come on, Steve. You got to know how beloved you are as a person. And how respected. I mean, people think you are among the best, if not one of the best improvisers ever.
I got snowed, kid. I have them absolutely snowed.
Every time I get off the stage, I say to myself, I fooled them again.
Yep, same here. Dodging bullets, baby. Dodging bullets.
That's it, man. That's it. But, so I was like, this thing happened and this virus, and all of a sudden, it put me in a place of like, what did you used to like to do? And I used to love to listen to Larry King on my clock radio at night, when everybody else went to bed. I loved that when I found out my clock radio also.
I used to do the same thing. Do you remember his like Why Are You Awake episode? It was like once a year. And because I think in the East, what did he run, Ali? It was like 10-2 or 9-1 or something, right? Like he was on for a while, and I think he had one, or I know he had like an episode a year that was just called like "What Are You Doing?" or "Why Are You Awake?" And it was dudes working graveyard shits in actual like graveyards, and guys driving bakery trucks or at hospitals or delivering newspapers. I used to do that all the time myself. Him, Dr. Demento, and Dr. Ruth. That's the two doctors on Sunday night. But man, I lived with that talk radio. That was the window to the outside, to the world that was still awake. Was all on talk radio then.
It really was. And then when I discovered it, because everybody else would go to bed, I was lucky enough my parents would let me watch Carson because they love Johnny Carson. So I would watch that with them, and then they'd go to bed, and then I would turn on Larry King. And then when I worked graveyard shifts at a freight dock called Pilot Freight, you know, I would listen to him as I drove to Kernersville to start unloading and loading trucks.
Yeah.
And then when I was like, you know what, I really like listening to people, talking to people, hearing about their journey. And what's always interesting to me is like those little moments along the way where you met somebody, someone told you should take a class, you ended up, you know, finding out about, you know, Chicago. And as I'm talking to these folks, I just see all like, you know, the interconnections and the little, you know, the web of connectivity among the people I'm lucky enough to be able to, you know, just get into the corridors of.
Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of those polls were there. You know, the polls you marked the place by were all there for an awful long time. Whether it was the Last Act or the Ale House or Marty DeMott or you know the people like Gelman and DePaulo that were around for long periods of time. You know, we ran into a lot of those the same folks, Sharn obviously, and now for a whole generation, including ours, is someone like Noah, who has been there. You know, has been like the kind of steady factor for. Gosh, I don't know how long. 30 years? Could it possibly be that long? Yeah, it must be. It must be close to that.
I think it's more. I mean, I got there November 1st, 1990. I flew into Chicago with a bag of clothes and a computer. And I think they were at that point, I think, at Papa Milano's.
Okay. Well, wait a minute. What kind of computer did you have in 1990 that you could travel with?
Well, here's the thing. I had a Mac SE. And it's a large computer if you look it up. And I put it between my legs on the plane from Raleigh, from RDU to O'Hare. And I had a bag of clothes I checked in. And I dressed like I was going to the Arctic because I'd never been to Chicago. But I had found out about the Second City, and the late, great Michael McCarthy was teaching a writing class. And he was a former SNL writer. And I was like, well, here's my ticket. I'm going to Chicago taking this class, and obviously they'll see I should be on the show, and then I'll be writing for the show.
I just found out that's how it happened for Michael yesterday at his memorial, that he worked at SNL before he toured.
Yeah.
Who the hell does that? How do you figure that out?
Well, what happened was Tim Kazurinsky, you know, became really good friends with him and knew him from Chicago, but Kazurinsky was at SNL. And then when Michael was there writing for a year, he was like, I always want to perform because, you know, I want to say my own words because it's not quite being done the way I want. He said, well, why don't you go back? So he did what Neil Flynn called a strategic retreat and went back and started touring and then got to be on the main stage.
Wow. A dear friend we have in common, Kevin Dorff, we were back in the boys changing side one time, and he just looked kind of like winsome, and I was like, what's going on, Kev? He's like, I was just reminded of the fact that this is the last job I'll ever have when I can say whatever it is I want whenever I want to say it. He's every time after this that I get a paycheck, someone's going to say it has to sound kind of like this or be kind of like this, but right here, right now, I can say anything I want.
Wow. It was his last show on main stage?
Yeah. It was just and the boys used to change on the stage left side and the ladies on the stage right. I don't know if they've rearranged it since then. So he and Richie Tallarico and I were over on that left side all together listening to AC/DC and early Jay-Z and you know, just laughing and smoking cigarettes and cracking wise.
I mean, Dorf is another guy that to me is one of those, to me I call them NBI, natural born improvisers, where at some point they played make-believe when they were younger, in some way, shape, or form. And then all of a sudden they found out, wait a minute, there's a way to do this?
Right.
And they found Chicago for us, for other people, other places in the country and the world. But he would do things like, I remember entering a scene and he just, from upstairs, he wasn't upstairs, he came downstairs and he took a robe and he just tied the rope of the robe around his waist. And I was like, wow.
He's also a man out of time. Like in The Shining, I wouldn't have been surprised if I walked around the main lobby there and saw him in pictures like, wait a minute, he's in there with Andrew Duncan and Severin Darden. How is that possible? He's in the cast with Alan Arkin. And what's he doing here? That he was just a dude who would have found a way to be subversive and cool regardless of what decade you dropped him in.
I got lucky to tour with him for a bit, and whenever we'd get to a town, the next morning he'd go get a haircut at an old-timey barbershop and a big breakfast and then have a smoke.
He told me a great story about you and he in a free throw contest when you guys were out with Blue.
Yeah.
And that the loser was not going to be allowed to speak. They could say their lines and and show specific stuff, but otherwise for the rest of the trip would not be able to speak. And I believe he said you cooked up the idea that you would tell everybody that you guys tied.
Well, what happened? We were sick of each other, right? Everybody. So, that happens on the road. You tour and it was like, you're tired of hearing people talk. And he was like, all right, we're doing a free throw contest. Whoever loses doesn't talk for the rest of the trip. I said, fine. And then, because I'd played basketball, and I spent a lot of time by myself shooting free throws. And
you played everything. You are probably the improv world's most sneakiest, most excellent athlete that people may not realize. You were you also like state caliber in tennis and golf or something like that as well?
I was lucky enough to play
hit a golf ball, and that's no freaking joke.
I enjoy it, but I liken that to the legend of Bagger Vance. If you have a swing in you, how does a 5-year-old pick up a club and have a raw professional swing? I mean, that to me is a testament of a soul.
Right. You say like the sculpture's in there. You just have to remove all the rocks that is not part of the sculpture, right?
That's right. How'd you know President Lincoln was in there? I just got rid of everything that wasn't Lincoln.
Right. Oh, wow.
And so Dorf and I did it, and I won, right? And then when we came back, everybody was like, who won? Who won? And I wouldn't say, and then he wouldn't say. And then he realized immediately, oh, you're not going to tell him, and I'm not going to tell him. So neither of us told him who won because it was one of those I am Spartacus moments, right? And then what's interesting is I had a scene idea they were working on, and Bill Cott played a guy who had a heart attack, and then I played Jesus, and then I believe it was Rachel and Amy, and Rachel maybe would sing a version of the Violent Femme song, and we built the whole scene without us talking. I was like, just through charades. And we toured Vanilla Femmes for a long time.
That's great. However you physically conveyed that you're supposed to sing a Violent Femme song, and this song in particular, without words, must have been a masterpiece of charade.
It's the magic of the road. The magic of the road. Among my favorite times in my life and at Second City was touring.
Same here.
I was a blast. So, I got there November 90, November 1st. When did you show up in Chicago? Because it seemed like, I might have been already touring or something, but, immediately, people were like, who is this guy? What did you show up from? What time?
I'm awful with years, so my best guess is that it was, and I think I'm right with this, October of 93. I believe is when I got there. Yeah.
All right. So a couple of years after me. And what made you? How did you find out about Chicago and want to go there and do this thing?
It was, I didn't know I wanted to do this thing. I knew I had a move in me. I had graduated college in December of '92 and worked a job refinishing bowling alleys to try and put some scratch together to try the move. And really I came to Chicago for two reasons. A friend from college had moved here and was working in television production. That's what I had graduated with a useless degree in, and said that she might be able to get me a job PAing. And also I remember visiting here as a child. I was probably 12 or 13, and just really liking it. It was a big, cool city. I liked the times when, as a kid, we would visit Boston. It seemed so alive and big, and the big city just seemed, intriguing and scary and cool. And so, in large part, it was because of a childhood trip here, and in equal measure, having a friend here from college made a big difference. That there was at least one person I knew in the big city.
And where did you grow up that you came to Chicago as a 12-year-old for a vacation?
I grew up in the great state of Massachusetts, in Western Mass, in a city called Holyoke, and my dad was stationed in Syracuse, where I was born, Syracuse, New York, at the Air Force Base there, where he learned to be a plumber. They made lifelong friends with another fellow who was learning to be a plumber in the Air Force, who they either were already from or landed in Rockford, Illinois. So we came out to visit Hal and Penny, and then spent 2 nights, I think, in the city of Chicago proper during that visit.
Did you by chance to go to Second City or see any comedy at that age, or you didn't even know that?
Did not. It was nowhere on my radar, and would have probably, I'm guessing I would eventually found it. There's no way to live here and not, but it would not have popped onto my radar if my friend Lisa, my college friend, didn't take me to see my first show.
She took you to see your first show once you got to Chicago.
Yes, she, as much, if not more than anyone in my life, set my boat on the course it followed. She took me to my first Second City show. She took me to my first I.O. show. She would not stop encouraging me and eventually badgering me to just take my first damn class. And if not for Lisa, I don't know how different my life would have been. It would have been, but I'm not sure how.
And how did she know, this is something you should be doing?
Yeah.
Were you always the funny one?
Not to my recollection. I would wish that everyone would have one friend like this in their life who just is able to see something in you that I guess you don't, or believe in you that way. Because that's what she did. She thought I would be into it and thought I guess I would be okay at it. But yeah, she had no stock in me other than she was a wonderful friend who thought of me in that.
Do you remember who was on stage at Second City or I.O. at the time?
Yeah, it was Take Me Out to the Balkans. I saw Mr. Carell. I once I started going, I would go back. So it was Mr. Carell, Mr. Colbert, Mr. Allman, Mr. Rosowski, Miss Adams, Miss Rudnick, Miss Hoffman. I think I basically just missed when Paul and Amy left, and at least the math I have in my head is that Paul and Amy left not long before, but before Mr. Colbert left as well. But I saw just crushingly good casts. And then I think the very first night I was at Improv Olympic, I believe I saw John Farley, Jason Chin, and a very young woman named Judy Fabjans, who was like this little sprite of a delightful young woman who I think might have been 15 or 16 at the time. I think she was just a little kid. Those faces I think I remember from the first night, and it was down the street a little bit from where I.O. was, more recently than the Papa Milano's, but I think in Abner's Yard on the second floor of what became like Mullins and a few other named bars, but a little bit down from where I.O. was on Clark on the second floor. That's where I remember seeing my first one. I don't think they were there long.
I mean, that's a phenomenal cast on main stage. I remember one of my regrets. I remember that cast. That was a phenomenal cast, and I remember we traveled with my girlfriend at the time all day, and we got back, and I said, let's go see a set at Second City, and we went to see the set, and we were sitting on the rail, and then Jackie Hoffman came up to me and said, hey, would you like to sit in with us? And I was just back then tired and most likely afraid. I was afraid. You know, I was sitting back on my laurels, and I said, that's okay, I'll just watch. And, you know, it's one of my regrets that I didn't say yes and at the time because I just didn't want to blow it, you know.
It was all the stuff we toured. It was Black Molly's and CIA Veranda and Pictionary. And, you know, it was the show that became the most, like, indomitably able to be toured sketches that I have. Because when, you know, like, hell, when I was directing, however many years later, we were still running 3 or 4 of those scenes. It was incredible. I think Spelling Bee might have been in there. It was just unstoppable stuff.
I mean, definitely, you know, in the annals of Second City, it's classic sketch comedy that's evergreen. And, you know, those guys in their hands, you know, they created something that, you know, would bring joy to people, whoever saw it, you know.
Yeah.
And it was great to do those scenes. I haven't thought about those scenes in a while, but, you know, and it was easy while you were doing them to begin to take them for granted and not treat them sometimes. I remember sometimes people wouldn't treat them with, like, because we'd done Pictionary so much, but it's to look at it with fresh eyes. You might have done it, but the people haven't seen it.
Right. And you know what reminds you real quick, if you do get like, these scenes, go ahead and try and write one. And then all of a sudden you realize, like, oh my God, these scenes, they're golden. Because it is no, at least for me, it was a mountain of a challenge to try and come up with, you know, a good scene. Never mind one that would stay, you know, like you said, evergreen for 20, 30 years.
So, as you were growing up in Massachusetts, was there ever any times where someone said, you should take this class, or you were in a school play, or a teacher said something that you were on stage in any way?
No, I showed no aptitude. In fact, the only time I was going to be in a school production, it was 7th or 8th grade. It was a little Catholic school. I think it was going to be like a Sleeping Beauty thing, and like I went to audition for The Prince. I sang one of the only songs I know. I think I sang God Bless America. And because I was like a brown noser and the nuns liked me, I got the part. I had part of one rehearsal with the lady who was actually playing piano, who realized I didn't know how to sing, what singing was, what a note was, any of that, and the whole thing got canceled. It never happened. So I never set foot on a stage. The first time I ever set foot on a stage was in classes at Second City. That was the first time.
Wow. Well, when I was younger, I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, population about 150, and we played a lot of make-believe in the woods. You know, a lot of it. You know, fake guns, Civil War, battles, diving, jumping, chasing Sasquatch. You know, did you play any make-believe growing up, you know, in your neighborhood?
My little brothers and I, we certainly played a lot of improvised sports. I would stand we had a front lawn that was maybe 15 by 10, and it was grass, and my brother would stand in the street, and we'd play half U.S. Open, half Wimbledon, because one guy was always on like a cement court, and one guy was on a grass court. We played a lot of sports. The make-believe I remember as soon as we did a lot of digging. Man, we dug in the backyard, like little, parking garages, because we had all these Tonka trucks, and so we did a lot of that. I was a real voracious reader from a young age, so I think that is where my imagination probably was exercised the most. I could really lose myself in a book, and would be the kind of kid, I like I said, I played a decent amount of sports, but if you sat me on a sunny patch of grass and gave me a book, I could keep myself busy for a long time.
And that was just, something that was natural, or did someone instill the love of reading in you?
I think it was fairly natural. I took to reading quickly. I read at a very young age, and I remember I would sit in my book closet, like pretty much inside the closet, and I can remember being able to have the sense of falling into the book, that I wasn't reading words on a page, but that I was inside of it looking around. And I went to the closet one day as I got a little bit older. I think I was 8 or 9. And I was like, well, I'll just go disappear into my book now. And I couldn't get in. I couldn't fall into it. And I got like kind of sad and scared of like, what if I never get to like fall into another story again, that this is what reading is now. It's a separate experience between me and the story. And that change kind of scared me. Maybe, and I haven't really pieced it together until I'm just saying this out loud to you. Maybe something like being able to improvise was my allowance to get back to vanish inside the story again, or vanish inside the tale, and not have to have a separate experience between the imagined experience and the participants.
And this love of reading, did it lead to writing at all, or did it stick to reading?
I try. Some books are so good it makes you think you can write. I just tried this not too long ago. I read George Saunders. I think it's called The 10th of December, or the 10th. Yeah, I think it's called The 10th of December. And gosh damn, that dude is so good at writing. I thought I could write, and I went down and write a couple sentences. Like, wow, he just made that look easy. He made it look so easy. He convinced me I could do it. The writing has always been a little bit more of a slog for me. Part of the reason I think that the idea of being able to write, in quotes, a review at Second City without ever having to put pen to paper, with just speaking words with another person that eventually would be transcribed, that seemed like a version of writing that I might be able to do, but I'm not necessarily good by myself, alone, just my ideas to roll off of. I have a harder time kind of inventing than reacting, I guess.
And was television and film a big part of your life, or was reading your primarily, mode of enjoyment?
I watched a lot of TV, certainly at an age, back when there were, I don't want to sound ancient, but, there were 3 networks. It was pre-Fox, and so if you were a kid, you basically could give me a day and a time, and I could tell you, like, oh, Tuesday at 8 o'clock is Happy Days, and then Laverne and Shirley, or, like, what channel? CBS, like, Friday night, 10 o'clock, you're watching Rockford Files. And so I did watch a bunch of TV, and probably just the movies like any kid did at that time. We came at the age of, in Star Wars and stuff like that, so there were some fairly magical franchises, I guess, being born when we were of that time to be transported at a theater. But I think a primary abiding love, and still like a nightly thing that started when I was a kid, was get in bed, turn on the light, and pull out a book.
What I loved about Second City, of what you just said, is the oral tradition of sketch comedy. The idea that you can go out and say, look, I'm going to sell a car, you're going to buy it, I've got a character, let's see where it goes. And it was almost like, if it was a place that was just writing sketch comedy, I don't think I would have been able to do. I would have been, okay or whatever. And I was not that I was anything that big a deal. But the fact that you could create on your feet with somebody else this 3-dimensional thing that all you got to do is go back the next night and do it again and leave out what didn't work and keep what worked and add new stuff was amazing.
Yeah, let it hone itself with the input from the audience and the moments you find, and whatever you find doesn't work, you don't need to put on CPR. You can let it go, find something else. But I think it's always been, and thankfully we ended up in the places we did, or I ended up in the places we did, that I feel like I can activate about 3% of my brain and by myself. Once it's acted upon by someone else, once someone else starts talking or has the beginning of an idea, then I feel like the rest of the lights go on, like boom, boom, boom. I can, oh yeah, and then maybe this, or like, sure, I'll go, then it feels like my brain is alive, but just fed by my own ideas, I think it would starve.
It's interesting. The other day I was walking down the street, and these 2 people were walking by me. They had the masks on in New York. They were walking a dog, and the man said some sentence. It's like, the things you remember when you're a kid. And then that's it, and he kept walking. And that was enough of a tincture for me to just play for another 20 minutes of using that voice, that sentence, and just making up monologues as I was driving for myself as this guy.
Yeah. It really is. I don't know if you went through that stage of like, I want to play more different characters, and you crawl up in your head and you start thinking of like ages, races, occupations, genders, so I'll just, throw in this combination of an 80-year-old lady who, swears a lot and loves her dogs. And it feels so false and forced when you try and put that out. But when you just see like, oh, what's the best thing that my partner could interact with right now? I'll just try and be that. And then all of a sudden you're doing things that you never did because it was born out of the necessity or service of like, this would be the best thing for them right now. And it takes your brain to do something you didn't do before, and now you're just doing something you didn't do before because it was called for, it's wonderful, man. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. I remember also when I was younger, I did a lot of playing make-believe by myself because we lived in a small town and, not everybody was able to meet up. And at one point I had this like fake gun and I was running around the woods, jumping and diving and then I was telling Glazer, I talked to John Glazer as well. He was kind enough to throw down the rope and put me on his show Delocated season 3. And all of a sudden there was a scene where I'm in full, Blackwater gear and a gun, and I'm running around the woods by myself while they're filming me, looking for John's character. And it hit me. I was like, I did it. It happened. Everything I did for fun in the small town in North Carolina, I'm doing it.
Another, not to bring everything back around to improvisation, but do you remember like those moments as a kid running through the woods, or we would play spy, where like, you run through people's backyards and you hide or you try and find someone and it felt like you could hear better, see better, that you were faster. It felt like you lived in this kind of like heightened state. And I remember thinking that exactly, being on the main stage in the middle of a scene, and you're doing the scene, but you hear the door open, and and you hear like Danielle Lachon bring out another set of drinks. You hear this table move their pretzel bowl. You see backstage out of the corner of your eye. You see Tammy Sager cross, like that you're in that same state where like, God, I'm a little more alive than alive right now. I'm 105% of aware and active right now. And the last time I remember feeling that was those kind of times, running through the woods or, through someone else's backyard, trying to find them and stuff like that you felt just a little more than human.
I remember when I was in the small town Danbury, there was a rumor that Sasquatch lived in our town, but it was one we believed pretty hard as kids. And so we wanted to find him. And there was, it was a small town where everybody had a motorcycle by the time. Yeah.
Ali, did parents start that rumor to make kids go into the woods or to keep kids out of the woods?
I don't know. Might have been a little bit of both. I don't know where it came from, but there was a smell, a pungent smell that was there that we associated with Sasquatch. And then if we smelled it, we knew. So what I'm saying is off of what you're saying, that the senses were more alive. And that's what I tell people. When you're on stage, it's just, you just have to like look around and you're not making it up. You're just saying like, oh, yes, I was in a karate dojo the whole time.
Right. But my blind eyes could not see until someone said the words.
I mean, it must have been something, almost, magical and filmic when you first saw those people on stage at Second City and I.O. and were like, oh yeah, now I know what I want to do for a while.
Yeah, it literally was, and I've described it this way before, but it was, and I've always used a filmic metaphor. It felt like the Cecil DeMille moment where like clouds part, ray of sun comes in, hits you in the head, and that's what it felt like. And I had the distinct impression that if I didn't try and do what they were doing, that I might never actually be happy. And that said, it still took my friend Lisa's encouragement to say, get your ass into a class then and give it a shot. But it was that kind of moment without a doubt. Yes.
I mean, I love that. I remember seeing the movie Chaplin with Robert Downey Jr., and I love that moment where they show him finding the hat and the cane. Because I love those initial moments of, sure, he wears this hat and this cane, but when did he actually pick it up for the first time? And to see that movie filmically of, like, you know, putting it on and being like becoming Chaplin, you know.
And this is coming from a man who spent some time wearing a hat around. You had a heavy hat period.
Yes, but I mean, that also came from that because we were doing Pete Gardner, God bless his heart. I love Pete. He was our director at Second City, ETC maybe. No. We were rehearsing in ETC. I was in Blueco, and we were going to be doing this form where you run someone for the office of the presidency. And he wanted us to watch a video of another improv, you know, group doing it. And I was like, what's to watch? You take someone from the audience and you run them for the presidency. And I was irreverent and a smartass, so I just started looking around ETC. And I pulled this couch out, I don't know why, and I reached back and there was a top hat. And I put that top hat on, and it just felt right.
And it didn't not feel right for a long time after that, huh?
Right, and I wore it, and then I didn't realize that I was in a community of people who were, you know, definitely would bust your shoes for doing something different. And so the top hat got a lot of grief. And then I didn't realize it was a big deal to wear a top hat. And then, you know,
I will tell
top
you.
hat times.
Right. I will tell you, I think we were going to cover this, that I knew of you before I had met you, that I'm pretty sure you were touring with Tammy, and Tammy and I were seeing each other, and she would describe you and in almost magical terms, like that you had almost this hypnotic effect that and so I had that in my mind about you, and then would occasionally see you in a top hat and if memory serves, occasionally a cape, and I was like, oh, that makes sense now that I see this man. But that you mentioned that you were backstage ETC and you know, moving a couch or whatever and found the hat. That is the day I would say I became friends with you, and I'm not even sure what I was doing back there. But you were in rehearsals and you were cleaning up the ETC. You were back there by yourself. You were putting hats in boxes, and I think the tie crate that's raised to the ceiling might have been you on a string that would, you know, just pull up on a pulley system, and if you needed it, you undid the rope. But you were back there, and I was probably working in the box office and just kind of derelict from duty. But we sat back there at the ETC while you cleaned, and maybe I pitched in and just gabbed. It was at a period of time when your watch, you had an electronic watch, you know, like one of the old Casios or Seikos or whatever, and it would beep every minute. Every 60 seconds your watch would beep, and you'd look at me and you'd say, time passes. And then we'd go back to work. But if I had to pin a day, it was in that green room in the ETC where I think it was like, oh, I actually talked to this guy, you know, like I think we're becoming friends.
I mean, I love ETC. To me, it's such a magical space. It's one of my favorite stages in the country. You know, and there's something about that green room, and you know, the history and the lineage, and you know, and how it wanted to be a space but wasn't, and then became a space because Julia Louis-Dreyfus wanted to put up, you know, present theater, and I remember that. You know,
stage is what, 18 inches tall? Would you say about that?
Yeah.
You know, like right close to the house, low. It had the benefit of kind of growing in the shade of the main stage when you didn't have like some of the pressure you could feel up there, you know, like it was like you felt like the cool clubhouse that was around the back from the other joint, you know, like I agree. There's something low, fun, cool, safe about that. Well, safe and dangerous, like safe to be dangerous in that little box. Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, to me, it's one of, you know, I mean, I haven't seen every comedy or improv stage in the country, but it's among my favorite stages to, you know, do a show or see a show.
Yeah, I hear you.
So when you worked at the box office at Second City as well?
Yeah, it was that was my first kind of job in the industry. I worked in the box office, and eventually I became the receptionist. I answered the main phone lines and took messages for people and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And were you already taking classes there at that point?
I had started classes, yes, because I needed to get an hour off from my reception shift so I could go audition for the Tourco. So my buddy Matt Collison, I'm sure, covered the phones for me, and I went back and into the ETC and auditioned. While I was working as the phones guy.
It's funny you say, because I was talking to Richard Kind, and he said he became good friends with Jeff Garlin when Jeff worked the box office. And then Colbert famously has the record for most T-shirts sold in a night, because one night he was like, I'm going to set the record.
Right. I think Kelly, I mean, he wasn't on the stage, but Kelly rose to promise. I think he started doing dishes, I believe, right? Back there with Mamet or whatever the story is.
That's right. Yeah, David Mamet washed dishes along with Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau and David Mamet and Kelly Leonard washed dishes at the Second City.
Well, the dishes got to get clean, right?
I guess, man. If I was a young kid, I'd be like, sign me up to wash dishes.
I hear you. That's the real way. That's the real pipeline around here.
I mean, so you start taking classes at Second City and IO at the same time?
I started at Second City before I went to IO. I think I went all the way through Second City before I went to IO. I took my very first class was with Don DePaulo, and Don used to like to go over to have some pops across the street. And so we were at the Ale House, and Don says, you know what, you should try out for level 1. Because I think you went like A through E or something, and then you had to audition, I believe, for level 1, and then you went 1 to 5. Or I have the alphanumerics exactly backwards, but it was something like that. And so I had been through my first class, and Don said, go try out. And so I went to the auditions for, level 1, and I saw Don walking by, and I was nervous and was like, Don, I did it. I didn't sign up for the next class because I came to audition. He didn't know who the fuck I was. He just stared right past me. He had no recollection at all of saying any of that to me. And so I was like, oh shit, I'm in the wrong place. I boxed this up so bad already. And lucky enough got through that audition and then completed the rest of the levels there and had Norm Holly as my director for our level 5 show. Yeah, so it's letters then numbers. So I had Norm Holly directing me in my level 5 show.
And who were some of the teachers you had there, and what are like maybe tidbits of like advice they might have given you that stood out? Like like I had my acting teacher in New York, the late great Win Handman, passed due to the virus recently, and his sentence that he used to go to was, "Ballast yourself in reality, and then throw yourself out into the sea of inspiration."
That's great.
And so the teachers you had at Second City, like Norm Holly, and I was lucky enough to be directed by Norm Holly in Blue Coat, and I loved Norm. He was such a great director because he would let you do whatever and give you enough rope to hang yourself and realize, because some directors wouldn't give you, so you pushed back against them, but Norm is someone who always lets you just do it, find out, let's see if it works.
It really is a great gift to have a director who's willing to let you go out there and die, like, because you thought you knew better. And then it's like that old Samuel Clemens thing. Like at 18, I thought my father didn't know a thing. At 21, I was amazed by how smart he had gotten. It felt like that of like, hey, this is gonna work. He's like, all right, buddy. I don't think so. I was like, don't worry, it's gonna work. And then you just suck dog shit. You come back, you're like, okay, I'm going to start listening to this guy a little bit more. Can
I tell you something?
Oh yeah, please.
I mean, 2 nights ago at dinner with my daughters, I was like, how can I explain to them, because one is 14 and one's 12 this year, that they are, and I went from being a cool dad to dad, and I said to them, Mark Twain once said, when I was 14, when I was 14, my parents didn't know nothing. By the time I turned 21, I was surprised how much they'd learned. And I said, you know what that means, ladies? that the person learned a lot in 7 years? It's like, no. That's not what it means. It means it's from the perspective of the 14-year-old turning 21, saying that when they were 14, their parents didn't know anything, but in 7 years, their parents had learned a lot, when in actuality, they learned literally 2 nights ago at dinner. Literally 2 nights ago.
Good luck.
Okay, you were saying
anybody anytime on that.
No more. Yeah. So you're there at Second City. You got Norm Hawley, Don DePaulo. Who are some other folks and some things they might have said that other people will get to hear from them?
I have Michael Gelman, and I remember Michael unlocking something, and like at the time you hear it, you're like, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard, and then you realize like, oh, this is one of the tenets of it. But you think they invented it. But I remember something very much clicking, because Michael was big on the show, don't tell, show, don't tell, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. And it helped me start to realize how unimportant, the freedom of how unimportant the words could be, because they were just another device there to show, and then how you didn't need them. I had, that thing that I think a lot of young improvisers do of like, oh, improvisation is standing there and talking a lot, and sooner or later you'll say something funny, as opposed to being up there, trying to live it, what it is that you're doing, and to let the rest kind of all be byproduct of staying in this thing with your partner. And something helped click that day for me. So that's one that really sticks out. Everyone had really, like, Don was very much into like the playfulness of it, and what a perfect guy to have first, because he just was like, go out and make. You can't judge it. You just got to go and make it. And then Michael was helping with Show Don't Tell. Marty DeMott, who was like, well, this is a masterclass in how you behave backstage, and when there isn't an audience there, this is how you treat people if you want an ensemble to be successful. You take care of each other, you look after each other, so it's a safe place for you to go ahead and try stuff, because, that's what you do for each other. And then Norm, having the advantage of having someone like Norm who technically put those running orders together, and this is why this comes after that, because you can't geek out that slot before, like that there was also a science and a method to how to piece these things together so that they worked, and I was hugely appreciative of that. Or this is what you want your scene to say, then this is how you allow your scene to say that. What doesn't say that, you don't need. And so, yeah, it was a pretty varied and important education. And then to have I.O. and to be taught by people like Cac and Scotty Robinson and Sharna, and a very young Peter Gwynn at that time, I think, was shadowing her. And then to go to the Annoyance and get, or to have Mick coach teams that I was on, Joe Bill, Eddie Furman, and to learn from those types of inputs in schools, where it was an incredible education, and that never had to feel like the weight of education. It just felt like other people were giving you ways to access play.
When I got to Chicago, I don't know why, for whatever reason, it seemed very tribal, like you did I.O., or you did Annoyance, or you did Second City. And there wasn't a lot of mixing, because for whatever reason, people wanted to be like, this is my guru is, Del, mine is Mick.
Right.
Right. But it seemed like you became a student of the craft. And I guess by the time you got there, that was kind of gone in 93, 94. And you just were able to, benefit from all the great comedy instructors at Spaces in Chicago.
Yeah, I think the guys, the people I looked up to, like Kevin or Steph Weir or Rachel or Tina, had been everywhere. Like Kevin had been at the Annoyance and I.O., and Rachel and Tina had been at I.O., and Steph, I think was home at I.O. for a long time, and then came over, and so yeah, I didn't come up against any like closed doors there. There was one night where I did something at Second City at 8:00. I got to go to I.O. at 10. I'm sure it was one of the off stages. It wasn't like a home show. And then that night at midnight, I went up and did Screw Puppies, and I was like, goddamn, what a lucky boy I am. I got to play tonight, like in the three pillars of the places that I was hoping someday to belong to, and no one turned me away at the door tonight. You know, I got to see them all. That was a little marker along the way in my head.
It's magical. And
it really was.
So you're taking the classes at Second City. You started doing stuff at IO. When do you start performing outside of a grad show and you're actually you get on a team at IO or something, and then you're all of a sudden it's like, this isn't a grad show, this is a show.
Yeah, the very first time I got to play was a fellow named Willie Laszlo, who was not really known within the improv community, but was a short filmmaker and stuff, improviser at the time. He subbed in. I had class with Aaron Rhodes. That's a good dude I had class with. Aaron Rhodes was cool as hell, man. What a trippy, fun, fantastical man. And Willie and I think we had a good scene together. And Willie invited me if I wanted to rehearse with this group called My Shins. That was not very long-lived, and to no pomp and circumstance, we would play at the Subterranean down in Bucktown. And we never, there were 6 of us. I think at our full there might have been 8. Sometimes we played down to 4. We never once we were never outnumbered by the audience. And initially we had to move the pool table over and just disturb people while they were trying to eat dinner. And then later moved up to this gorgeous upstairs room where, there was 3 people in the audience, but we played every week, and I got to feel more comfortable on a raised platform, saying, hey, look what we're doing up here. And that was really giving me the first chance to actually play somewhere. And I think it was for a free cider probably at the time, but man, did it feel good.
I mean, so those first, you felt to me when I first started playing make-believe, on stage, it just felt like it was reconnecting the dots of childhood of oh, this is where I feel more comfortable. I'm not as comfortable off stage with people.
Right.
Right. I'm more comfortable when I'm on stage, and this feels like breathing, and the whatever world is is not as real to me.
All right. Yeah, I definitely felt like this is, and this, this belief refined itself over time of this is closer to the person I want to be. This is I listen better. I'm more emotionally available, even if it's in pretend emotional states. I'm allowing myself to feel, and I'm, more curious. I'm a better listener, and so those things felt like, oh, this is a look into how you could be, T, if you got rid of more of your fear or, social anxiety and stuff. You could be a little bit more like this guy, and this guy feels better than the other guy.
At what point do you get placed on an IO team? Does Sharna see you and go, oh, yeah, you should be on a team?
Yeah, a fellow named Paul Preston and his future wife Karen Volpe, who recently passed away. Paul was putting up a show. He was at IO and was putting up a political show there called Night and Day, where based on audience suggestion, you define 2 candidates, and there would be a debate, and then there'd be scenes based on those debate issues. And he invited me to be part of that. Sharna came, and I had a couple of months before asked if there was an internship, and she said there wasn't one available. And then after that show, she walked up to me and, in that kind of Sharna wide-eyed, kind of put on wide-eyed, who are you? It's like, oh, my name's TJ. I talked to you a couple months ago about trying to get an internship here. And she goes, well, there's one available now. And I never had to work to my, forever gratitude. Sharna let me take classes there for free for the rest of my time there, and I found a home. That was how I found a home, and I would consider Improv Olympic my home.
It's funny. I talked to Sharna, a couple of weeks ago as part of this, and we talked for 3 hours. And
wow, how was she?
She's amazing. So fun to catch up and go down memory lane, and how fond she is of you and Dave and all the folks there.
And but also the family, my friend.
Yes.
Big fan of family.
We talked about that, about how, that was a magical time for us, because, for us, we really found a family of sorts, the brother from another mother type idea, and then Sharna being kind of a den mother. But it's interesting you say, because I signed up for one class, and she had a deal where if you got someone else to take a class, she'd give you $50 off your class. So the classes back then were $150.
Like made for you, my friend.
It's my sweet spot. My sweet spot. I mean, to me, it's like, do we got to use money? Can we not barter everything? How can we figure this out? How can we get out from under this slavery of money? And so the class was $150. She gave it to me for $100 because I got my friend Gio Diviacci, who I had just met in Michael McCarthy's SNL class. I was like, you should take an improv class. He's like, okay. And so I wrote her a check for like $100 for that one class. And again, she never charged me again to take a class. Yeah. She let me just take classes with her and Dell until she put me on a team. So she gave you an internship to work there or whatever, and you started taking classes.
Yeah, it just ended up being like a scholarship. But yeah, I started taking classes. Yeah, and it was with CAC and Scotty Robinson, and I'm sure I had Sharna for one. I think everyone had Sharna for one then, and I think Peter was shadowing, and then eventually got up to Dell. But back then, if you remember, like you could end up on a team much earlier than you didn't go through the whole route there. You could be plucked off a squad. And so in my second class, I believe after CAC, I got placed on a team as sit-in on a team called Bucket and on a team called Georgia Pacific. And then I was on Georgia Pacific for, maybe 15 years, 12 years anyway, maybe 15.
Now, Georgia Pacific, I mean, it's one of those teams, when you hear the name, it is a, institution-type team at IO. I mean, Jack McBrayer was on that team, right? Paul Grandi?
Jackie, Paul Grandi, Lisa Lewis, Chris Hammond, Chris Day, Pat Shea, and then more people came in later, like Joe Bill would play with us, and Sutton, and I know I'm missing someone I'll regret. And hell, I was on Bucket with no joke. It was Allison Silverman, Jenny Bills, Christina Gaussis, Mills, I think, was on that team. So I got placed in a couple of real nice homes. Tammy was on Georgia. It was a pretty killer room.
I mean, you mentioned those, and each of them in and of themselves, the truckload of talent they bring to the party.
Oh, Eddie Herbstman was our coach when I got on there initially.
And, these folks, Jagadowski, Kaki, and these guys as your instructors, are there things, again, along the way that they may have taught you that someone who'll never get a chance to study with them, may benefit from? A sentence or two or anything?
I'm sure. I wish I had taken better notes. I think those things kind of soaked in as opposed to hit me like an axiom that I still hang on. CAC gave excellent technical instruction, where like I was always appreciative of that, and it's probably something I do too little in the few times that I teach, because I was just into kind of the encouragement of the like love for it, like this all can work, where CAC would be good about like it can all work, but this probably works a little bit better. And I actually at the time had a bit of I caught Dell, I would say. He was my last teacher in kind of a hammock spot for him. I don't think, because I know the way the people I love it talk about working with Dell, like David does, and I just had a hard time in class with Dell. I don't think he, at the time I caught him, was as excited about teaching at that time. So I hate to work around the question, but I don't have a good answer, and I wish I did. I think it was almost like going to an amusement park where like, man, what'd you ride? I don't remember everything. Like I think I kind of felt like that, where I was just going and doing and so thrilled that I don't know how well I was paying attention.
Well, I mean, that's, what I tell my daughters when they have to get up and talk or give a speech or something. I say to them, look, no one's going to remember what you said. They're going to remember how you made them feel. I said, don't take notes on what you're saying. They're just listening. But if you make them feel a certain way, they'll remember that feeling, You know, I think that's important. You know, it's like, you know, sometimes you're lucky if an instructor has something, a refrain or something they say, but ultimately is how they made you feel, how they encouraged you, how it tells you to keep going, and, you know, and being there. You know, that's a lot of it. They showed up, so you showed up, so they gave accountability to the whole thing.
Right.
And made it real, because otherwise, I don't know if you've ever been to a rehearsal or something where a teacher didn't show up or a coach didn't show up, and they're like, let's just all rehearse together, and you do, but it's not quite the same, you know.
You don't know who's going to call. You don't know who calls scene. You don't know.
Right.
You end up the first scene's always like 17 minutes long because everyone else is like staring at each other like. You know, it's funny, like, who's going to be the fake teacher now? Because someone's got to say this ends at some point.
Right. I mean, and it's one of those things like you kind of need rules. You know, without rules and a time clock, you know, it just loses a little bit of its flavor. You're doing IO. Sharna loves you. You're doing your thing there. But at a certain point, you go back to Second City to do Tourco, I guess.
Yeah, and during this time I was still working. My regular job was working in the box office, so I was around over there, you know, and slipping in and watching sets and stuff like that when my shifts were over. But yeah, when I was went and auditioned when I was working there as a receptionist and made it and got in, got to tour with the company that I eventually wanted too, which was Blue, which was you know, everyone from my generation's favorite crew, the one that you were on.
Yeah, Blueco to me. I mean, that cast we had in Blueco with Tina and Amy,
mighty,
and Rachel,
mighty man,
Dorf, and Bill Cox.
And then they just reloaded with Tammy and Pompeii, and you know, like it was just they just reloaded. They never had to regroup. They just reloaded.
No. I mean, it was one of those times in my life where, I don't know why, but where I'm like, take a moment, look around, because this is pretty cool. And I thought to myself, if I never get to main stage, that's okay, because I'm around a main stage cast right now. And I get to be a part of this and get to play with these people. And, you know, and it's funny because Dorf used to say this thing, which I wasn't a fan when he said it. He would say, you don't want to work at a place where you want to be on stage. And I think, Dorf, people got to have jobs. I mean, if they can break through, so you can't just have some kind of blanket statement like that. I mean, Jesus, Kev. And I love hearing.
He was saying they didn't. And I'm guessing what he was saying is like he didn't want them to see you as, oh, that's a T-shirt guy, or that's
exactly.
a waiter. Right.
He was like, if they see you as a bartender or a waiter, they're never going to see you as a performer. But I'd be like, look, if you're good, you're good. You can break through it, you know. It's just, you know. And so I love hearing, you know, when I hear that Garland or Colbert or you work there and then showed them, like, I should also, you know. And that's what I loved about Second City, that it created a job for you. I mean, when I found out the sets were free, I was like, wait a minute, what? Yeah, 6 nights a week I can come here for free and you won't make me feel bad about it?
Giving it away? Giving it away?
And then I was just like, borrow with your eyes. Borrow with your eyes.
I hear you. I hear you.
And so you got a chance to tour. I mean, with a phenomenal cast. I mean, even you know, because after that point, I'd moved on and I'd left to go to Los Angeles for a while. But Pompeii, Tammy Sager, you know, all phenomenal in their own right.
Ford,
Andy Cobb, Al Samuels, Susie Gillen, Abby Sher, Holly Walker, like all of those people, you know, came through. And while I was there, Pam Clear, and like you were saying, I loved the road. It was cool being on a stage and them coming to your house, but to go to their house and feel like you had a wrapped gift for them was awesome. And the little adjustments of this night, like, because, you know, like one place wouldn't have a left wing exit, you know, so everyone's having to pile out the right side, or like it's just you know, for this day in the back, your stage manager is flipping a light switch, and so kind of adapting to a different set of, you know, circumstances whatever town you were in was just wonderful. When Kelly brought me into the office and said we're thinking about putting you on main stage, I said I don't think I'm ready. Can I? He's like, well, I said, what about ETC? He's like, no. I said, like, can I just stay on the road? I really like the road. He's like, no, you know, you're gonna get hired for one of the boxes. But I adored the road. I got along well with it. easy people to get along with, tons of laughing and places to see. And, we saw, or at least I saw the country that way. It was wonderful.
Yeah, to me, it almost seemed like comedy missionary work where it's I need you more than you need me, but you don't know that. You think you need me, but I'm just a tree falling in the woods, and without you, I don't know if any of this works. And then, like I tell folks,
hello, Iowa, you don't know how much I need you.
That's right. Hello, Dallas, I'm here for you, but really, you're here for me. But I got to see, Dealey Plaza.
Yes.
I remember Amy Poehler and Bill Cott and I went out to Waco to see the compound, Koresh's compound, because we got directions. We got to go on the ski tour. I mean, there's so many amazing memories. So Kelly pulls you into his office and says, "You're going to the big show, kid. That's it."
Yeah.
and you get one of those slots. Something that doesn't happen often. It happened to Tina. It happened to Farley. Where they went right from Tourco to main stage. And so you get there, and who's already on stage at that point?
There was a little bit of turnover, so already definitely coming back was going to be Dorf, Tallarico, and Steph Weir. I think we're set. I went in for Jimmy Zulovic, and then soon added were Susan Messing and Tammy Sager. But I think the three of us were. I'd been on the stage for a little bit, just finishing out the run of Jim, the previous Promise Keepers in Jim's roles, and then Steph was already there for the previous, and then Tam and Suze started up, or might have been finishing out the roles, but it was all of I think the three of our first review at that time.
What a cast! What a great cast!
Killer, man, killer. Maybe the single, I think to my money, the single up to that point strongest purely improvising cast I had ever seen. Those are all just trained international assassins.
Yeah. And who's the director at this time?
Mickey Joe Napier.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
I mean, because in Dorf and Napier, you gotta think you got two people who are like anything goes.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
And so, I'm sorry.
No, it was just it was a wide open sandbox. It didn't feel like there was anything we couldn't at least try.
To connect the dots for me, from the time that young human is sitting in there seeing their first Second City show, your friend Lisa brought you to it, to the point where you're on the main stage. How many years is that?
probably 94, and then I think I was there 99. I think it was 5. Is that possible? I think my first class was 94, and I was on the main stage in 99.
Not even the first class, the first time your friend brought you to see a show.
Yeah, I think I moved here in October of 93, if my numbers are right, so I would have seen my first show, I think, in 94, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
somewhere right around there.
That's quite a time dash.
It was pretty cool. It was pretty damn cool. Yeah.
And then where along the way does TJ and Dave happen?
Interestingly enough, we were thrown together for a Chicago Improv Festival. There was a looming strike. I think like a SAG and writer's strike, and so they thought a lot of people were going to be around for the Improv Festival, and then the strike didn't happen. They had counted on some of those people being there because the strike seems imminent, and so they were just hustling around for people in town who were, otherwise not playing. And so I was part of a little group that they put together along with Dave for that night. Dorf and Atzett had already planned on being here, but then I think it was Jimmy, Napier, Pasquesi, and myself. I think that was it. So that was the first time I played with Dave. It was still a little while after that until we got together as a duo. But that was the first time I got to be. I'd met him once before, just really briefly. I called him Mr. Pasquesi, and he told me to go fuck myself. And then this was the first time I got to see him, kind of up close and be in the game with him.
And then at that point, I mean, Sharna's, you approach Sharna to get the coveted Wednesday at 11 o'clock slot in the basement.
Yes. And I think, yes, we both wanted that because, like, well, it's out of the way. If it's awful, not many people are going to know. And Dave at the time was doing Glenn Ross at the Steppenwolf as Ricky Roma. So we had to also come up with a time that was late enough for him to be able to make it over once he was done doing one of, like, the best roles in American theater and just crushing it. And he said, when he told me to go fuck myself, it was kind of joking. Like, I just want to make sure. I want to make that absolutely clear.
Yeah. Again, also, I just also want to say, I don't know if I'll figure out how to post this. So I don't want to promise you anything because at this point it's just a conversation of catch up. That's all it is.
That's fine with me.
I'm an old brown clown with limited tech abilities, and I need to find me a tech nerd who's like, I'll be your radar.
Yeah, you'll find him.
I'll find
Michael McCarthy to intern.
That's right. You know what's amazing to me is, like I said, these connect the dot moments of you show up in Chicago, you see your first improv show at IO, right? You're doing the show at Subterranean, in front of 3 folks or whoever. But then I get a chance to see you on Broadway doing TJ and Dave, which is a pretty phenomenal journey to take from, where you began at IO to, doing that show with Dave Wednesdays at 11. And then at some point you grow this thing through Barrow Street and Scott Morphy's help and take it to Broadway.
Yeah, and it really is thanks to those guys at Barrow Street. It was because Scott believed that a bridge could be made between improvisation and the straight theater community in New York. He stuck with it too through Small Houses and Thin Returns and yeah, it was because of those guys and that fellow down there named Tom Wirtschafter. We eventually put it up at the town hall, and the biggest house that Dave and I had ever improvised in, for straight long form improv. It was a 1,500 seat house. I think we got 1,100 out. We didn't sell it out. I'm not claiming that, but 1,100 people, to our knowledge, came to watch long form improvisation, and that in itself was pretty cool happening.
I mean, I think for a lot of us, it was, almost like a moon landing, because even though we weren't on the stage, it was a feeling that improv got to Broadway and got a chance to show what long-form improvisation can be, again, it was a magical night to be there to watch that and to see you guys grow through Barrow Street. One thing when I talked to Michael Shannon about Scott Morphy, I said, what makes him so good? And he said, he's just got a great eye. Morphy can just pick shows and people of, like, this is a good show. This is a good director.
Found Tracy Letts here way back when. I think Killer Joe was, I think Scotty was the one who brought Tracy to New York for the first time, and yeah, he had an eye, and I know that, like, Nichols and May and in a much more for real way did improvisation there. So I don't want to pretend like Dave and I were the first, but it was a heck of achievement for us. It made us happy inside to be able to play anywhere in New York, but that happened. We felt proud.
Yeah, I mean, it was something. Yeah, I mean, and Nichols and May, definitely, they deserve their kudos. A different generation, a different time, but also, them doing their thing along the way, where people have shown up to take improv to higher ground to show people that it can stand on its own.
Like UCV, who really cracked New York. That seemed like an egg that was impervious to Chicago putting a real strong foothold in, and so and now Pitt, Magnet, like it's for real there now, and it just used to skim off the surface, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, that's our hope. The challenge now is bricks and mortar. Apparently, like I said, landlords haven't got the memo that we're all in this together. So, for me, the hope is we get to that space that you and Dave originally performed at, the Pit Loft. I was doing Homebody Cabo at Steppenwolf. And Dave said, TJ and I are thinking about coming to New York to do a show. What do you think? And I was like, well, do it at the Pit, please. And so you and Dave did that show there that Scott Morphy came and saw, and I think Tracy might have been there because he was in town. And, my hope is that I can save that one space because
Buddy, I think and I don't see how the math works out any other than that was the very first place you let us play the very first time we ever played in New York, as far as I can remember.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's all symbiotic to me. It's win-win. You create these spaces and places because you want them to be more than just an empty loft on the second floor of 29th, 25th, and 7th. And then, by getting someone like you guys to do it, you're putting life into a space. And I do have even with this virus, I'm always like thinking, does the virus have a consciousness? Does it have a reason that it's doing this? Does it know what it's doing?
It's mutating. I'm sure it's mutating. It's probably developing a brain of some sort, man. It may get to sentient by the time it boomerangs in October.
But then that's what I think about spaces, that spaces have consciousness too, and they draw you to them, and then also feel better when they're filled with, people doing good things. Yeah. But even out of Chicago, you've gotten a lot of work in film and television, which is not easy. I know you're, Chicago dyed in the wool now. But, these things just came up. You had auditions. Obviously, people know about you. The various roles, Get Hard, and the other films and projects you did. Because again, I've never Googled you or IMDb'd you or looked you up prior to our talk. But I was like, let me just look them up, just because we're going to talk. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. We could do bits for the whole time. But let me see. It's like, wow, you've got a lot of stuff just out of Chicago.
Probably as much as I could handle. I'm not super good with script, and so luckily a lot of the things that I've ended up being able to do, I got to improvise, and so if I'm happy about anything, it's that just about all of those were had elements, if not entirely improvised, which made the experience a little less nerve-wracking for me. I kind of get confused easily with memorization. So but I've been able to send some postcards home through a couple of little small, and that's not a complaint. That's just inaccurate. Little roles in stuff. This is pretty cool.
It's interesting because I was talking to Neil Flynn the other day, and I'd read that when he was on Scrubs, they had lines that just said Neil does something funny. Right. And the only other time I'd ever heard that was for Harpo Marx, where they had written Harpo does something funny. And so to hear you say that it was basically TJ does something funny here, it's nice to see that people now trust, like, look, sure, I could write something, but what this person's going to bring is going to be three-dimensional. And it's still collaborating.
And thankfully, like, it was TJ and the scene partner. We'll do it. So it was in that way. Thankfully, it wasn't like alone. Just let the guy rip. It was TJ, and like I got to do a tiny little part in Stranger Than Fiction with Pete Gross, who I'd been doing commercials with for forever. And so the rapport, the fact that we were hired together, and and we told Mr. Forrester, who directed it, like, we do commercials if this bothers you. He's like, I don't care, and he says, like, just you guys talk like guys would talk in an office, and that's what that's what we did. Or Adam, because of that, Adam and Will hired me for Get Hard, and and just spent the day hitting on Kevin Hart, and they would throw out ideas like, how about this tack, and Kev had the hardest job, because he had to find a 1,000 ways to say no. I got to ask 1,000 ways to say to say yes. So he had the hard time that day. But yeah, it was the improvisation has given me an awful lot, more than I could repay, and part of it was the chances to do those things. Or the movie I got to do the most in was directed by Mr. Ramis, and Mr. Ramis came from came from like the same tradition we did. And so like my death scene, he literally said, he was behind the flat, he said, like I'll just give you a different emotion each time and just try the line with that emotion. And so he yelled, like hurt, surprise, disappointment, like humor. And so I did it 6 or 7 times, and he was like, "We got it," and then we were moving on.
Wow. I remember seeing Harold Ramis at Dell's Living Awake and just thinking, wow, that this guy is coming here to say goodbye to somebody who he studied with, and then to hear you say, he gave you a chance to basically be you. It's nice to hear and connect the dots like that.
He was such a wonderful man. From day one, we all had a little dinner together, and he was the most regular, considerate, nice, sweet, down to earth guy. He'd given every reason not to be. He just was. He was wonderful.
It's funny. I'm a big fan of good gossip, and I tell my daughters, if you're going to gossip, spread good gossip. And they're like, what's good gossip? I said, good gossip is telling good things about people you know and spreading the word about that. You don't want to spread bad gossip. Spread good gossip.
Mr. Ramis said, here's one little story that tickles me. Initially, I don't think I was supposed to die in the first script. And he goes, I had him write that scene, like, where you get killed. I was like, really? He said, yeah. I said, I decided if I was going to hire that apple pie face, I was going to need to put a bullet through it.
Oh, man. It's funny. I was talking to Pat Finn the other day, and I said I used to have a bit were called the nice off, where I would get the nicest guys in improv I know, you, McBrayer, Stack, Pat Finn,
Jackie,
and then get them in a circle and see who would be the last one standing by getting eliminated by somebody saying something not quite as nice enough.
There'd be like a table of snacks that no one would have wanted to be the first one to eat off of. It'd be a really sad little room. Brian Stack, the day I introduced myself to Brian, I had heard about him and seen him. He was on ETC at the time. I was working in the box office, and he came out to get a soda. Maybe they were in rehearsals. And I walked over to get a soda, and he goes, "Hello, I'm Brian Stack. What's your name?" And I was like, I'm TJ. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, TJ. And we met, like, I haven't met someone in this manner since maybe 3rd grade, of like, hello, this is my name. What's your name? This is my name. Huh. I guess we're friends now. And that's what it felt like. It was the most lovely, unpretentious manner in which to meet someone ever. It was lovely.
I mean, Stack to me is like a sniper. He's like a laser surgeon. You'll be there on stage. You won't notice him, and then he'll step out and say or do something where you're like, wow.
Yeah. In our society, these customs wouldn't seem so strange. And then it's done. It's like lights. It's always going to be lights on Stack.
I mean, and I owe him a lot, because when I first started the pit, he thought of making me Conan's agent for the show, and those gigs were what allowed me to kind of continue to kind of grind through the first years of the pit. But I sat in a few times with Greenco, and we'd done some corporate workshops. I always loved, Stack and, what he brought to the table. I always had this, like, idea of doing, like, a daily show type thing with you guys, and it's just good news, where you guys are just going out and you're just, all the things you're reporting is just you're finding good news stories, and you're just out there in the field. But
from the side of a plane crash, we'd still be saying how many good bags of peanuts there are here.
That's right.
Still plenty edible peanuts out here, guys.
And you mentioned Peter, and at this point, the commercials you've done, the Sonic commercials, have become, part of modern Americana in terms of iconic campaigns that have gone for a while. How did that come about? And did you guys audition separately or together, or what's the story of how that became what it is?
Yeah, we did. We auditioned separately. It was an audition down at O'Connor's, which you remember is like kind of a pain in the ass to get to. It was all the way down by Harpo, where Harpo Studios were. And honestly, Ali, at the time, I was drinking pretty heavy, sleeping pretty late, and missing a lot of auditions. So I'm not sure why I even made this one. It must have been later in the day. Yeah, Pete and I auditioned separately, cast separately. I think they had settled, if I remember right, they had settled on Peter pretty early, and then I think I was in there with a couple other dudes. The dude who I remember being up there were Pat Shea and I think Neil McNamara. And for whatever reason, they settled on me. And at least, man, like it is the most professionally fortunate hiring, without a doubt, that I'll ever have in my life, without a doubt.
Well, let's just say up till now. But I mean, yes, it's phenomenal. But it seems so fun. You and Pete, from my understanding, get to improvise a lot of that.
At the very beginning, the first ad agency was a group called Barclay Evergreen. I think they were Barclay Evergreen Partners at the time, out of Kansas City, and they were kind of a smaller operation. And this fellow Pat Piper and Matt McKay had the idea, and it was just us truly driving around to other people's drive-throughs and improvising with their wait staff. And I think again, like I'm hoping I'm getting most of this right, is that they, I think, had tried to cast it out of the coasts, and like I think in New York they were just a little too rough-edged in their play with their improvised auditions with their window worker, because you didn't want to like come off as demeaning or cruel. And that I thought in LA they had a hard time finding people who would work together as well. And then they came to Chicago and found, I think, more than they needed, or I know more than they needed. Pete and I guess, had the right kind of touch of like playing with them and sort of getting the idea across of the commercial, like Sonic has this, you guys don't, that we're talking to, without coming off, I think, as, putting off an audience of like, hey, why are these two mean guys just going on and ripping on, the fellows working the Burger King window?
Wow. And so, how many commercials? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you started that. Yes, we used to get to, we have a little index card, and like Pete and TJ, ask for coconut flavor. They don't have it. Maybe they can blend up the coconut they have. And so it really was just wide open. We would just improvise, for 10 hours a day or whatever. And this poor guy over at the White House, the editing suite here, a dude oddly enough named Matt Walsh, who was the editor for him, would get like 38 hours of raw footage dumped on him, and he'd have to cut him down into 22-second spots with an 8-second tag. So that poor guy just slugged through enormous amounts of inanity while he was trying to find something that was usable.
And you and Pete Gross knew each other before that. You'd improvise together, right? You were.
Yeah, Pete and I had been twined in fun ways. I had coached his I.O. team, and Pete and I were both in his understudies on the main stage one time, and he had been for Door for a couple of nights already. And at the end of our first scene, it ends with a hug between the character I was playing and his, and he just held me in the dark and said, "It's going to be okay." And then Pete went into ETC. When I left ETC, Pete went into that spot and joined the cast. So we had been twined in a bunch of fun fashions up until then, and then we got hired as partners.
And when you did that first commercial, did they know it was going to be a campaign, or was it supposed to be one commercial?
No, we shot like what we thought. Pete and I remember distinctly being in the hotel in Arizona in Phoenix, and we were at the happy hour eating like free red, white, and blue, tortilla chips. And I had a napkin out. I was like, Pete, if they make 3 commercials out of this and run it for like 2 cycles or something, dude, we could make somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,000 fucking dollars, and we're just like, yeah, like those cartoons where there's little kids in the Depression, but they dream of like being in a candy store and like the cupcakes are walking around on little legs and stuff. And that was what like our eyes were doing, of like, holy shit, that's a year's rent right there. That does it. So we had no idea that it would whether they would show them, whether it would work, whether they'd keep us around, and we're still, right now we're under contract until September of this year. I think it'll probably, we don't know what will happen at that point, but that was, I don't know, February of 2002, I think, and we're still hired right now.
Wow. I mean, that's the rifleman level of staying on air.
Nuts, man. Nuts. I mean, it is.
So how many spots do you think roughly thus far you've shot?
Our rough guess up until now would be in the 250 to 300 range. And not all of them would have showed nationally. There were some that were regional. I tell you, poor kids in West Texas have been berated by us, for almost 18 years. As they play the living crap out of them down there. But yeah, my rough estimate would be between 250 and 300.
Wow. Ted Williams is somebody you like, right?
I did.
As a baseball player. And Ted Williams, one of the things they said to Ted Williams is that, when he walked down the street, he wanted people to be able to say, there goes Ted Williams, the best that ever was.
Yeah.
Is that something with the world of improv that you think about, that when people see you walk down the street, someone could say, there's TJ Jagadowski, the best that ever was?
I'm a bit embarrassed to say two things. That when I first started, that is what I held in my head. That is what I wanted to happen. I wanted to do what Teddy Ballgame said. And I'm also embarrassed that I was inspired by a Joe DiMaggio quote, which I should not admit, but DiMaggio, they say there was, a game and a season that the Yanks had wrapped up, and a game that they had wrapped up. He's busting hump to go, flag down a double before it hits the ground. And someone asked him, I think it was a reporter asked him afterwards, why do you do that, Joe? Season's in a bag, game's in a bag. And he said there may be someone in the crowd has never seen me play before. And so those two things I would carry with me, throughout my education and improvising career. I feel a little bit embarrassed saying it now that I would want to think, I don't know, so grandiosely or individually about that. But I guess what I thought at the time was well, if I'm going to do this, then I may as well try and be the best there ever was. I know I won't, no one can get there. That will never be a settled argument or a goal you can achieve. But as long as I'm doing it, I may as well do it like that than some other way.
Well, I mean, I think, you're definitely part of the settled argument, the conversation of that, of people having it. But it's interesting because the second story, I use that with my daughters, but I always heard it as a Shoeless Joe Jackson story.
No kidding.
And I used to tell them,
I'd love it if it was Shoeless Joe and not Joe DiMaggio. Yes,
well, I don't think I think it really matters. I think the important part is, someone saying to someone, why are you playing so hard? We're already out of the playoffs. This doesn't matter. Why are you chasing down that ball in left field? And he's like, someone out here has never seen Shoeless Joe Jackson play.
But for my sake, if I can get him out of pinstripes and down on the south side of Chicago, better for me. So that would be great. I'm going to start telling it as Shoeless Joe from now on.
I'm going to look it up later on the old Google and see which it is.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you could wave a magic wand for yourself, I mean, it seems like you got a pretty wonderful life. I know we were supposed to talk earlier, but you got a puppy and such, so you got a puppy and whatnot. What would you have for the next chapter of your life, if you could wave a magic wand?
Yeah, it's going to be something. It's going to be something different. I know we've mentioned, a deep love that we both have for this city and for Chicago and stuff, but I think I'm moving to a quieter time and a quieter place. I've been wanting more nature, quieter, slower. So if I could wave the magic wand, and hopefully there won't need to be a ton of magic in here because I might be able to do some of it without magic. I think I want to learn how to make beautiful things out of wood and bake great pastry. And so I've started noodling at low levels around with both of those things, but I would have the magic one I might need for the size of the backyard and the garden that I want. But it may be time for a new stage that I'm not sure necessarily will involve show business. It might just be kind of a quieter, simpler form of living.
And away from Chicago, in a different part of the country?
I think so, Ali. I think I'm like Eastern Seaboard, maybe inland enough to stay away from hurricanes. So unfortunately, I think I would rule out Charleston and Savannah, but I might look at your great state. I've heard wonderful things about Asheville. Beth and I took a little visit to Pittsburgh to see if it would put its prongs into us, but I think it might be a little further east and in a quieter kind of place.
Well, I did my Outward Bound in Asheville, North Carolina, and ever since
did you really?
I fell in love with Asheville, and I really love that town. And
I hear it's a lovely little like liberal enclave, and it's pretty and all of that. So that's good news, because I will definitely be doing an exploratory venture there this coming year when it's okay to travel.
And so for a bit, or for the foreseeable future, you want to not geared towards improvising or acting or teaching improv for a bit.
I think so. There was actually there's a form or the start of a form that I have been itching to work on that was sort of based on the coronavirus. The idea within a long form of contagion and mutation and kind of seeing what those ideas will breed. So it's not like I'm done with it, but I will tell you, and I don't know if you feel this way, Ali, about when you look back on your like athletic life, that I miss practice and I miss the dugout. I miss the gym. I don't miss game time as much, but I miss the camaraderie and the practice work. And I think when I think about doing this, it's less the putting the show up that I want to get, dug in on. I want to get dug in on rehearsals. I still want to be in a room with people feeling livened by ideas and surprises and that kind of stuff. So even if maybe performing is done, I don't know if I'll ever be done with the bouncing of ideas amongst the group to see what a gang of, creatively motivated people can turn out.
It's interesting you say that. When I talked to Reed Birney, I don't know if you've met Reed, but he's a phenomenal actor in New York City, and he was with us in Homebody Cobble in Chicago. And he mentioned how he loves the environs of the theater, the backstage, the hanging out, the going out after shows, but he said he might be done with being watched by people on stage.
Is that right? That's kind of how I'm feeling too. Yeah. Did he say what it was? Was he able to put his finger on what that change was, or what about that one aspect he wasn't enjoying as much anymore?
I don't know. I mean, I talked to Reed early on in the virus about this. I don't know if I'm thinking of Brando or Reed, but there was something about him that just, I don't know, silly about it. He had done it enough. It started to take a toll on him where it just didn't feel right anymore. It just didn't feel good. And, and he just said, you know what, it's unfortunate because I love everything else about it. Right, I love hanging out backstage. And Reed and I were dressing room mates in Chicago at Steppenwolf. And I said, what's this giant bowl of candy for? He goes, you'll see. And then every night, without fail, everybody would come to our dressing room to hang out and get candy. And
that's great.
I walked away after I left Second City the first time. I walked away for about a year and a half and didn't perform. But I mean, again, I was young in my 20s, and I was like, they're going to say the last time he ever performed was at Second City, and then he never performed again. And I just realized nobody cared about me.
Right.
And then Farley passed away, and I was talking to Pat Finn yesterday, who's Farley's, best friend in the world, and his passing is what basically, made me go, I got to get back And so, you know, having this opportunity to talk to all these people, it's kind of, for me, as I said, the various, you know, ephemeral connections, you know, the spider webs that, you know, are almost unseen, but I get to hear these stories.
Do you mean literally on the big board? Are you guys side by side alphabetically?
Yeah, well, we were, and I'll send you a pic, but Farley, and the way it happened, I told the story to Finn, is when I was in L.A., my girl at the time said, turn on the news. I said, why? She goes, Chris Farley just passed. I said, oh. I turned on the TV. The TV lit up. It was one of those old-timey TVs where it has to, like, warm up. And when it warmed up, it had the list of names at Second City on the wall, and my name wasn't going to be beside his. And it would have been had I not quit because of that prom show incident.
Wow.
And it began to look like that Back to the Future photo that fades in time, you know, that if you don't go back. And so that moment I had an epiphany of, like, I got to get back to Second City somehow, some way to get my name beside his. And then, thankfully, Mr. Jeff Richmond put me in a show in ETC, and Kelly Leonard okayed it. And that next Christmas, my name went up beside Chris Farley on that wall of names.
Wow.
And then later, subsequently, they stopped doing it alphabetically and now do it by year you came in.
Oh, right.
So, you know.
Because that was every kid's, like, you know, the 23-year-old in the box office or wherever you walk over there and you imagine, like, you know, where your name, who you'd be next to if you got there. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, that name thing. I was traveling back and forth from Chapel Hill, North Carolina to New York, and it was just more economical for me to do it via Megabus. But Megabus would stop in Washington, D.C. for anywhere between 2 to 3 hours. So I would always, get off the Megabus in D.C., and I would take an Uber and go see President Lincoln. And then on the way back, I'd stop by the Vietnam Memorial, and I would just find where my name would have been in that memorial. You know, I just think there's something interesting about that, to seeing where you would be in place and time by name.
Right. Wow. Well, you know, I hope Mr. Lincoln has the decency to do the same if he finds himself in New York. You know, that he'd pop over and say hello, for God's sakes, return the favor after all this time.
I would hope so. I had this story. I did this scene in a TV show called Law and Order with Mr. Sam Waterston, and he and I were sitting there. It was a 2-shot, and I had to, you know, make conversation. I said, you know, I saw you play the young Abraham Lincoln, and I'm a big fan of President Lincoln as well. He goes, oh, you know, I'm only 3 handshakes away from Lincoln. I said, do tell. He said, I shook my mother's hand, my mother shook her father's hand, and her father shook Abraham Lincoln.
Is that right?
And then at the end of the scene, I shook his hand, and I said, thank you, Mr. President. Now I'm only 4 handshakes away. I mean, for a kid.
Handshaking in that Waterston family, huh?
Man. I mean, they're just
a whole relationship between the children and the parents.
Left and right. But, I mean, yeah. For a kid like me, born in Esfahan, Iran, to come over here and to be 4 handshakes away from Abraham Lincoln, I was like, how about it?
Not too bad, and never mind, be directly on handshake with Mr. Waterston. How about that too?
and as far as reading goes, you still enjoy reading the way you used to?
Yeah. I can still, every once in a while, I woke up and realize I've been inside the book again. So yeah, I still read, and I still try and read like I did when I was little.
It's funny the things you say, you know, because a lot of it resonates. After I left Second City the first time when I quit, because I was like, I'm done, I was working at a place called Panacaldo at 72 East Walton. And I decided I wanted to be a pastry chef, so I started working with the pastry chef, Guillermo. And Andrew Alexander, God bless his heart, came down there to find me to say, what are you doing? You know?
No.
When are you going to come back and be on one of the stages, basically? You know,
I'm up to my armpits in shoe pay. Got a shoe right now, Andrew. I can't. I got a 4-foot croquembouche due by 2 p.m. What do you think, man?
I'm trying to turn this sugar into spun art.
Right.
But there is, on the block near where we live, there's a pastry place called Eclair, where a French gentleman named Stéphane opened it up, and he studied in Paris, and then ultimately opened up his own place. And I tell my daughters, this almond croissant is as good as you get in Paris, and this is art. You know, because they just eat stuff. They eat it, but I'm like, this is chemistry. This is alchemy. The layers to this.
Yeah, there's caramelization. That doesn't happen naturally. You know, like that's got to be worked on, especially to the proper level. Good Lord.
Well, I mean, a lot of what you say, it resonates, you know, so much, you know, of what you're talking about. And, you know, sometimes we got to walk away from the thing we love the most to realize why we loved it in the first place. And, you know, I think life is about chapters, you know.
Yeah. If I had a strength as an improviser, I think it was that my joy in doing it shone through. And when if I feel that joy isn't present, I'm worried that will show through as well. And I don't want to play like that. You know, I don't want to do that to myself. I don't want to do that to improvisation. I don't want to do that to a partner, an audience, a show. So maybe it'll change. You know, I never thought it would feel like I wanted to put it down. So maybe that will change again. But right now it feels that way.
Well, I mean, I think, as I tell people too, you know, you got to know when to edit in life as well. Editing on stage, you know, and I whenever I teach, I always say, if you think about editing, it's too late.
Yeah, right.
You got to already
follow your foot. I think is always backstage at your place, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, follow your foot, because your foot will start vibrating before
anything
else, and it'll go, I need to get out there to help, or I need to, you know, walk on, and we cut off that impulse from the heart to the foot, you know, and then the lizard brain, and then our logical mind comes on, and you know, but I don't want to upset them. I don't want to edit. Maybe they got more to do. And then it's over.
This, you know, like 1,000 years from now, this that your thoughts on this will be misconstrued to say that like humans' comedic sensibilities lived in their feet. They will, you know, that no wonder why they covered them in socks and shoes, because that's where their brain was.
That's right. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie AI. It's like a little-known Spielberg film, but I love that film. At the end of the film, there is like, aliens, and these aliens, they've reached a point where they don't speak anymore. They just are able to put a hand on one person's shoulder and get it completely.
Show don't tell. It all goes back. It all goes back to Gelman, man.
I mean, when you think about improv and the improv you've done, I mean, you know, in the same way that a carpenter might say measure twice, cut once, or an electrician might treat everything like it's hot, you know, as a credo to live by. Were there things that you used before you stepped out there to help you, touchstones?
Yes. To this day, and if I play in anything other than Dave, that is a specific kind of thing. The one thing I will do so that I feel kind of safe is I will take a piece of whatever the pieces of information that I want to metabolize. If it was a statement from, you know, a monologue in Armando, a thing that was mentioned in an opening, or just a suggestion, I will give myself the half second to develop an emotional point of view on it. So if it was newspaper, I'll say like my emotional point of view is that, you know, if you look to the back of the page, there was a good news story in there. There's one little good news story, and I'll make that like a kind of a modus operandi for a person. So I'll walk in with the emotional point of view that if I look at anything carefully enough, I'll see that one good bit of news, of value, of gold in anything. And so whether I talk first or talk second or don't talk at all, I feel provided for. I feel taken care of by that emotional point of view, and I still will do that every single time.
Now, you said when you work with Dave is the only person you don't. Do you do something different there?
Yeah, I just kind of let everything go. I don't approach with a point of view. David and I really just try and trust that when the lights come up, there'll be a moment there that will provide everything we're going to need for the next hour. So I might accidentally have a look on my face or whatever, but without a suggestion or without anything that's like kind of baked into the batter for inspiration. I don't want to reach outside of what we inherit to bring something into it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I guess with everybody with the inside baseball type idea of, wanting to know, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? There's so many times where you guys are, you're doing two-person improv, but you're in a scene and then someone has the wherewithal to go, now I'm going to get up and be the other person, or now I'm going to get up and be my partner, the character that they played for a while. And,
right.
It's, I guess, the challenge for people like me and others who do this is the wanting to know, you're in the moment and you have to kind of stay in that moment with the person till the very last second where that thought comes to you to make the move.
Right.
Because it's hard to have those two live in the same place at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be analyzing it while you're in it. I think more often than not, one of us bounces when we realize, oh, the more interesting thing is happening between someone we can't see right now. So we should make sure we at least, see the most interesting relationship physicalized. And so it's that kind of thing. It's not necessarily an analytical thing as it is like a realization of like, oh, A and B have much less going on between them than B and C. I should go be C, and then that opens up the A slot so that if that changes, either one of us can go to fill in that that form. But we try and serve where the most interesting packed moment lives, and sometimes that's not the two people that we're standing in at that time.
And then trust us, this is all made up, as a film was made, by, what's the gentleman's name?
That was Alex Karpovsky.
Yeah, who's an accomplished actor in his own right, from Girls and many other things.
We didn't know.
But he just, saw you and said, hey, I want to make this documentary about you guys.
I think he was dragged to it. I think he would say that he was dragged to it by a friend of his who was an improviser and an improvisational fan, and Alex had no desire, didn't like it, didn't like improvisation in general, or had not liked his experiences with it. And then I think he came and saw the show a few times, and I think he liked it more, but as much as anything was interested in the relationship and the actual process of it. I think he was as a study of it that intrigued him, I think more than anything else. And so a decent amount of the focus is in how Dave and I feel about each other, how if anything you witness during the day kind of influences how you come to the stage that night. But then, God bless him, the only thing we asked, I believe, is that if we mess up, if we take too long, if we fumble, pause, call a wrong name, that has to stay. We can't tighten it or fix that in an edit. It has to run warts and all. And he was totally cool with that and probably had already, decided that for himself. And so then the last 50 minutes or so basically running the concert film, it's just, start, press record and press stop at once it's over. But the things he had to go to do to figure out how to shoot that well, Dave and I were trepidatious because, you've seen, whatever form of improvisation shot, and it's, usually a handheld camera in the back and, whatever life you felt was in the room just, at the time does not make it onto that camera. So he had, I think it might have been 9 cameras. I think he had 4 locked, a big overhead, and 4 that he could kind of call on the fly, and had a friend who let him go watch Monday Night Football done in the truck. And that's what he kind of used as a template of following the action where it was. So he was calling, camera 2, give me a close up on Dave, camera 3, give me a 2, all that stuff as the show was happening, he was in a little booth calling it live, like a sporting event.
And from the get-go, you guys chose not to take a suggestion, or is that something that came about? Because, the suggestion in improv has been, since the beginning of improv, part of it.
Yeah, that was Dave's decision. That like, well, if they don't believe we're improvising, getting a suggestion is not going to make them believe that. Just because you throw the word spatula in is not going to be like, oh wow, I guess these guys really did make all this up. So that's basically where what became our tagline came from. That he walked to the front of the stage and instead of getting a suggestion said, "Trust us, this is all made up." Which was, at the time, just an actual request that you're just going to have to believe us. And so, yeah, that's where that came from. I think also that without getting a suggestion, we were left free to just inherit whatever, in the theoretical sense, the first organic moment when the lights come up, without being influenced by, a potentially corrupting factor. That if we just trusted improvisation would take care of us, then a moment would rise to show itself to us, and then we'd both be taken care of, as opposed to like, now we got to think, now we got a chest of drawers, like we just removed that almost for the sake of ease.
I have such fond memories of coming to Barrow Street and watching you guys, and then going to AOC and just hanging out, and whether it was a cool fall night in New York City or the crisp winter, but I mean those were magical nights too. To come to New York, I would think
it felt that way, man. When you, because I had never played anywhere else here, and so I was stubborn about Chicago, and like, this is the best. It's done better here. It's done by more people here, and I didn't want to fall for the charm. But the first night of walking out of a theater in the Village, and feeling like, man, I just played New York City, and people came, and then to walk over on those nights, to a place that's kind of like so rustic and warm as the AOC, it felt, it felt like almost dreamlike. There's that little patio if it's warm enough in the back, but it's all candlelight and all wood and a tiny little bar, and it had that kind of fairy tale sort of feel. So those really were, and my mom would load up a bus of 40 or 50 people from my hometown, from Holyoke, and they drive down, and it was, there was a lot of inherent magic in that. And at the end of the day, to be able to look at Dave and and feel like, hey, we fooled him one more time, Ali. Like we dodged one more, and to have done that with someone, that always feels better.
I mean, to me, it's like, obviously, how I feel about you as an improviser, but are there people you stood up like Dave with where you were like, oh my God, this person I'm running with wolves. They're good. I mean, you've played with so many people, are there, I don't want to put you on the spot to name folks, but are there folks where you're like, wow?
I still feel that way every time I play with Steph Weir, like, man, I gotta run to catch up here,
Right.
I certainly for a long time felt that way about Adsid, of like, this is another goddamn. I still, and I've been friends with him since, 97 or something with Kevin Dorff. I still don't get how that mind works, Ali. How like, it feels like he's always seeing the world from a satellite, and, and has the big sense of what the hell's going on in the world, and I can't even make sense of the one little part of it that I can see. So there are still horses that I can't run with. No one will, like, I don't know if he slowed down to let me catch up, but there's nothing like running with Dave. That's Man of War or Secretariat or Citation. It's a different pony.
It's interesting you say that, because I had Stephanie Weir when I was first started teaching at IO. Sharna was like, you should teach. And I said, okay, because it was basically Sharna, Dell, and then, Miles and me. And Steph Weir was in my level 1 class that I taught, and I was like, had the feeling immediately of like, uh-oh, I can't help you. All I can do is watch you. But you should already be much further along than me. And with Dorf, I remember one time at I.O., he'd already moved on and doing other stuff. He came in to sit in with us once, and I think he looked at me before he went out and said, "Watch this." I was like, "What?" And then when I first got to Chicago, I went to see, because I was like, wait a minute, if I take a class at Second City, I get to see shows for free and these sets? So I went to see the main stage show, Flag Smoking Permitted in Lobby Only. And as the lights came up, there was Dave, Pasquesi and Tim O'Malley doing a blackout to open the show. And so, the fact that, and then Atsit is one of those guys where it's like, I try to watch him to see, what are you doing? Are you improvising? You're making it look so like you're just off stage,
Yeah.
And to be able to even, call these folks, people that I've, got a chance to play with for a moment or know them. I feel like, I've been very lucky just to get to a place enough to be in the conversation of being able to talk to folks like this.
Yeah. I watched Grandma's records maybe 100 times. No word of a lie. And one time I asked Atsit, because you're just clocking. You're clocking everybody. You're clocking every move. You're trying to figure out how to get better. You're watching. I said, Scott, like, why does the priest check he checked his watch on the inside of his wrist? So he wears his watch with the face, like the face on the on his palm side. And I said, how did you decide that guy was going to check the watch on that, on that side? I swear he went, does he? I said, yeah, he does. Like, I didn't realize. So I was like, wait a minute, you asshole, you're this far inside some dude that you don't even that's just how that guy does that? That's not you saying that guy does that? Just that priest does that? And I was like, oh man, I'm never gonna get good at this. It's like, if that's what it takes, I'm never going to get there, man.
But it's almost like a divining rod for Atsit. It's like something to hear a story like that. It's just, I don't know, almost like being infused by the spirit.
Into a spring or something. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, wow. I can't believe I got a chance to talk to you for this long. You've given me the most valuable thing you have, which is your time. And I hope it all worked out with the pup this morning. What's the doggie's name?
Josie. Yeah, she's about 13 or 14. She's getting some subcutaneous fluids right now to help her kidneys along. We've been doing it for the last 2 weeks, just about every day. And right now, it is showing some pretty great results. She seems like herself again. So we are hopeful, very hopeful. Yeah. Thank you for saying so.
Well, thank you, man. I think the world of you as a improviser, the Ted Williams of our generation, and as a person. Yeah. You're among my, the people I put in the nice off, and if I could wave
I'd be happy
magic
to take
wand.
suckers down.
There you go. You're out. All right, there's 4 of you left. Finn, Stack, McBrayer. All right, let's see what happens.
Well, thanks so much, Ali. It was a real pleasure talking to you, man.
Thank you. If I can ever be of service to you, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Best to say hello to anybody who still remembers me, Tej.
Yeah, I will, and good luck with everything there, brother. I hope the spaces work out and they the help comes.
Well, we'll see you on the other side then.
All right. Thanks,
Take
Ali. Bye-bye, buddy.
Wow. TJ Jagadowski. Legitimately can be called definitely one of the best improvisers who ever lived. Maybe the best. But it's great to be able to talk to him. Such a good guy, such a student of the craft. And it just shows you to some degree that if, you're meant to do something, you'll be drawn to it, or it will draw you to it. Improvisation and the art of improvisation at this moment in history drew him from, Massachusetts to Chicago, and then the friend Lisa who, took him to a show, and then he saw it and said, I've got to do this. And there's something magical about, the world of make-believe. The challenge with it is, being able to afford bricks and mortar spaces to put it up. But I guess the spaces will just get smaller and they'll get to be, out of the beaten path. because it'll be harder to hold spaces, in populated areas. But I think there'll always be a room from here on out in the world for people who enjoy playing make-believe and people who enjoy watching people play make-believe at a high level. I don't think that'll ever go away, because I think once we, the world, found it, again, whether it's the committee, which led to the Second City, the Players Workshop, which led to, Improv Olympics, the Annoyance, UCB, the Pit, the Magnet, all the various places around the country and the world that found improvisation and the vernacular of improvisation. Yes, and until you have to say no thank you, making statements, not questions, listening and reacting. Hopefully there'll always be a place for it, even in a post-pandemic world. But time will tell regarding our spaces. If you're still listening this far, I thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Like I said, I still got to figure out how to post them and what to do with them. But please check out thepit-nyc.com, thepit-nyc.com for online classes and classes in the real world someday, we hope. And spread the word about that. I hope you're healthy, wherever you may be, and if you're not healthy, I hope you get healthy. And I hope once you get healthy, you appreciate your health. Wherever this may be finding you, I'd like to say good night, or sweet dreams, or good morning, or good afternoon. Hope to see you someday in the real world. And until then, safe travels, and so long, and spread the word.
Thanks for listening to Global Comedy Studios. Is this a bad time to talk? Stay tuned for more.